What did you learn from him? What did he say?
Well, Scarlett, I mean, he was surprised by this. He learned of it in the Wall Street Journal. He actually hadn't been contacted by any authorities. Let me share with you some excerpts from that conversation. He said to me, "We do not know of any investigation. We believe that making inflammatory and speculative statements is completely irresponsible on the part of the Wall Street Journal." He went on to say, "I am very proud of my 50 years with an unblemished record and have never given out inside information." And then, Scarlett, he also told me, "Well, I have obviously heard of Phil Mickelson. I have never spoke to him or met him."
So it's not like they went golfing together or anything like that?
No.
Huh.
No, you know, it's interesting because he did know Billy Walters, but he had never met, never spoken to Phil Mickelson. So it brings up a lot of questions here.
Well, what about the investigation and his public image? It can't be good for his public image.
For Carl's, I mean, I'm sure, no. I mean, gosh, I mean, this is the last thing anybody wants, right? I mean, realistically, this is hardly a headline that you want to pick up the paper and see, especially if you're Carl, especially if you're someone who is very proud of having 50 years with an unblemished record. But, you know, in order for him to have been in violation of security rules, he would have needed to have violated a rule called 14E3. All right, this is something that says you're going to notify someone of a planned tender offer. The other rule is the more standard one where you break a fiduciary duty. That would be Rule 10B5. So in this particular case, the question is, did he possibly tell Billy Walters ahead of a planned tender offer that he was going to do this for Clorox?
Well, you know what's sort of curious here? I mean, it's not as though he actually made a tender offer, right? I mean, Carl Icahn, all he did was send a public letter that said, "I'm thinking of buying you guys," right?
You are so right, and that's the nail on the head, and this is what will be his saving grace here, I would think. I spoke to the banker that banked Carl in that Clorox deal, that wrote the financing letter, a guy named Rich Handler who had been at Jeffries, and he said, "You know what? It never actually went through." And this is public information. I mean, Carl put a letter forward to the board saying he'd like to buy the company. He proposed a potential merger between himself and
again, a public letter.
Public letter, but it was a little like Dell, right? It was never an actual tender offer. And so it was a little bit like all talk, right? You say, hey, I want to go out and do this. So the question now is, how is that interpreted as insider trading? I spoke to John Coffey, professor of securities law at Columbia University, and he said, you know what? It's not.
No,
so
it's
not legal cover.
And Tom, think about what we learned from Doug Burns, former U.S. prosecuting attorney, where he said, you know, this is a very sloppy case at best. That's a former prosecuting attorney saying that to us.
I go back to being flabbergasted on a Monday morning that both the FT and Bloomberg News aren't picking up on this story.
And in fact, the Wall Street Journal, the way they write it this morning is a little bit like, oh, now it's not clear what's going to happen.
Michael Rothschild and Susan Pulliam, trade probe hits snag as surveillance is derailed.
All right. Well, Trish, Regan, thank you so much for bringing us Carl Icahn's comments. Great job.
Thank you, Scarlett.
Speaking with Carl over the weekend to get the latest in reaction to the story.